Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The-Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Ben Jankowski, who is the founder of a new company called Modern Media Solutions. Ben, welcome to the show. It is so wonderful to see you, even if virtually, and I am loving your background. I am just loving the Chinese symbols from when you were working there, and it is great.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm excited to spend some time.
Excellent, excellent. Well, look, before we talk a little bit about your new business, I'm hoping that you can share some thoughts on the business of media. You spent several decades, around the world, dedicated to media's role in marketing, and you've been involved with so many trends. You've seen so much over the years, so much evolution. I realize this is a sweeping question, but what is truly different about media now and the way people engage with it?
Yep. Yeah, I'd probably break it into two pieces, right? So there's ways that the industry works, and then there's ways that the consumer behave that have really kind of changed. And so let me just start with consumers. Obviously, the speed and depth of how they've embraced technology has really, the industry created this technology for them, and they've really kind of embraced it. And it's like, there's the obvious things like mobile is obviously been a game changer in everything that we do. The growth of all the things around audio assistants and how we use voice in a different way than we ever have before. The growth of new content distribution, whether it be podcasts, and some of the content that we're creating here today wouldn't have been a form factor that we would have talked about 5 years ago, 7 years ago, things like that. And then obviously new technology, things like virtual reality, things like that. So those are kind of like the consumer behavior changes, the biggest consumer behavior changes. And I think it's in terms of the industry, all the things that you can consume content today, I think that one of the challenges it's created a really terrible advertising experience. Right, the number of people who ad block, who stream through commercials, things like that, have been because we've created, people get bored with ads. If you do a lot of video streaming, things like that, and you wonder, why am I seeing the same darn ads 10 times? We've created a horrible experience. So the first thing is we need to figure out how to develop a more holistic experience. We also know so much more about consumers, customers, than we used to. We can target like we never have before. Now that changes every day, right? Now we have to deal with the elimination of third-party cookies and things like that. But one of the changes about our ability to know more about customers, is changing every day. It's getting better and better. And then how do we keep up with those changing consumption patterns? Like our ability to stay current with knowing all the different places where people consume, and trying to find ways and opportunities to reach them. So those are probably the biggest trends. And most of them are all kind of centered around how we're behaving differently because the world's become, we just have so much more different opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm assuming also that as much as we hate to keep talking about this darn pandemic, but there's no question it accelerated some of these trends. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I think the biggest ones from the consumer standpoint, streaming video, right? People were streaming before COVID, but now, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who wasn't yep, while I was in COVID, I streamed either while I was sick or while I was quarantined, I streamed X seasons of this show or that show. So streaming was growing, but it wasn't growing anywhere near this fast. The other thing that's really grown off the rails is, in an accelerated manner is e-commerce. It took, my favorite stat is it took 10 years to move e-commerce 10 percentage points from 5% of the total sales in our country to 15. So it took 10 years to go from 5 to 15. It took another 6 weeks to go from 15 to 25. So the speed in which that change happens is just that's directly because of COVID. And I think for marketers, the biggest thing is how do we create virtual opportunities, especially a lot of people that are like experiential marketers, like MasterCard. We used to do, when I was at MasterCard way back when, 2 months ago, we did a lot around experiential marketing because we believe that consumers have the opportunity to, touch and feel and interact with us. They'd be better customers. And we proved that. But most of those were personal experiences, whether they be all the amazing things we did, like the Grammys or the World Series or Champions League or Rugby World Cup. And when those things stop becoming live consumer events, we have to figure out how to get scale on that pretty fast. So it's actually been an opportunity to move from, like, the cool part of it is we've had to teach ourselves to go, how do we go from the personal, I have to be, in the same place experience to digital experiences. And actually it's helped us create a lot of scale that, to be honest, we didn't have before. So not all these changes are bad changes. Some of them are like, it's forced us to accelerate the way that we think, which is really cool.
No, I think you're right. And I also recall something that MasterCard did, in terms of virtual experiences with your award with your loyalty program.
Crisis Cities, yeah.
Yeah, and the virtual reality around explaining what the awards are about. And I think we're seeing so much more of that. It makes me wonder. I know that marketers need speed more so than anything else, but it makes me wonder a little bit about how we characterize innovation. You brought up some points about, we have a terrible ad experience now in the digital world. You're being stalked sometimes, by you clicked on flowers and it's for someone's birthday, and the birthday is now past, but you're still getting the ads. How do you break through? How do you characterize innovation?
No, I think that's one of the points where I talked about in terms of how to break through. You really have to be careful about, really understanding the consumer journey. And I think when you think about innovation, again, I like to think of it as what's consumer seen and other, what I'll call commercial innovation, ways for us to kind of, do things differently that are innovative, but make the business run better. For consumer seen, it's things like, virtual reality and the continued growth in audio. I mean, the number of people that have the VR glasses and things like that, it's just grown so much more. I mean, 5G is definitely going to speed up the way the consumers consume. It's going to give us more data opportunities and things like that. From the commercial standpoint, we have to figure out, like, there's so much opportunity to have more data. Like, we have so much more data. We have to figure out what to do with it. How do we create value that people actually want? I have a theory that when we talk about privacy and people being creeped out by marketers being in their face too much, if we as marketers figure out a value proposition, like, if you deliver me something that I want, I happen to be moving my apartment. So to bore you with a personal story, I applied for one online estimate for a moving company, and now all over my social media, I have dozens of dozens of messages. They're annoying, but if somebody sat there and said, here's the opportunity, to get some sort of value, maybe it's a discount, maybe it's something, we have to figure out, if we provide consumers value, they won't be creeped out by our intrusion. We're creating value for them. And I don't think that mindset, I don't think we've really focused on that so much.
Yeah, no, I think we're so concerned about, all the top of mind things, from creativity to metrics, to how much, first party data it's generating and so on. Sometimes, like everything else, you have to go back to the consumer and start thinking about
We have to, they're the center.
Yeah.
If you miss them, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Deborah.
Yeah, not at all.
If you don't, they're the focus. If you don't focus on them, then you've lost the plot.
Yeah, and they usually give you the clues to what they actually want.
More than they ever did before. We just have to be able to figure out how to apply them.
Yeah, and probably listen carefully.
100%.
But let me ask you something, because the way that you describe it, I mean, this is not simple.
No.
This is a very complex, competitive media ecosystem. And one of the things that you talk about is also how it's forced agencies to evolve. Now, you know a fair amount about that, even though you have certainly been on the marketer side for over a decade. But, how are they evolving? Is it all technology based or is it something really larger than that?
No, I think, I mean, first things first, I spent 30 years as an agency guy and I loved it, right? I've had an amazing career. I'm, fortunate and blessed to have had an amazing career. And part of that would be I wouldn't have the same career. If I were a marketer for 40 years, I wouldn't be as good with our craft as I would have been if I spent 3 decades, if I hadn't spent 3 decades at the agency. So everybody's got an opportunity to evolve more. I will give the agency credit. They've evolved in some places. In one place in particular, a lot of agencies, most of the agencies, I'll call out Dentsu, Publicis, IPG, have made investments in the data space. Others have made other similar investments, but I mean, in the data space, they've realized the opportunity and they've invested in that space. They're working on figuring out how to apply solutions. That being said, there's still a lot of room to grow. I think there's two things. One is the marketplace is so complicated. There's so much going on. I think the agency community has to figure out how we can band together agencies and their clients who are paying their bills, by the way, marketers, how can we kind of band together better? Sometimes agencies are working so hard to create differentiated value for that agency. I think it's a competitive point of difference. We should spend more time figuring out how the industry can collaborate together, obviously in a, following all the regulations around, compliance and things like that. I'm not trying to, unfair trading advantages, but the agency have to work better together to solve our big problems. TV ratings is one of those problems that it's a big problem that we have to solve as a group, not as everybody can't have their own solution. So huge opportunity for them to work a little bit more with themselves to find consensus. Marketers have made more progress probably in the last 5 years of realizing in some of these battles, my traditional competitor is actually my partner and not so much my competitor. The second place where we need to reimagine, especially on the agency side, is talent. We have a serious talent problem. Like in COVID has sped it up. It's been very, very difficult. Imagine me saying very 1,000 more times for agencies to keep talent. It's been worse. The agency talent shortage is worse than it's ever been in the 40 years I've been in this business. So those are the two places. Collaborate more, work more as an industry, and we have to solve this talent problem because it's not working and we have to figure it out.
Well, it's interesting, not that it's necessarily back to the future. I don't kind of believe that. I think each time has its own set of challenges and operations. But there was a greater sense of closeness or partnership between clients and agencies at one point. And sometimes, that collaboration can solve problems, but that might be one direction to go, because I actually feel bad, that agencies have so many things upon them now, whether it's not the increased expectations of clients, smaller margins, you mentioned legislative restrictions. I mean, it's very difficult.
And clients have brought a lot of that on their agency. Right. Yeah. Marketers, again, there's a really fine line between, obviously compensation is the core area where agencies get revenue. And there's a really fine line between being paid fairly and equitably for their work and the ability for one side of the marketing spectrum to squeeze agencies and continue to, really put unfair terms on them that are onerous. And the other side is like, there are very unsophisticated marketers. And frankly, there are some conditions where I've seen agencies, in some cases, when I see agencies take advantage of marketers, or conversely, when marketers take advantage of agencies, that kind of environment doesn't help us solve our problems.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, let me ask, if you don't mind, what you think has been the greatest negative change as well as the greatest positive change for this relationship, particularly between media agencies and clients?
Yeah, and I kind of tried to answer it in the first. I think that their ability making a lot of traction in the data space has been really positive, right? So the most positive one is they figured out how to make the investments they have to make in the data space, and it's helped us know more about consumers and customers than we ever did before. The negative space, the talent problem today is a very serious talent problem. We also still have this air of lack of transparency that's still a challenge that we have to sort through. I mean, again, we have to, figure out a way to partner better together. And I talked before about the different ends of the spectrum, both marketers who feel like they can, squeeze the agencies for more and more and more, and then agencies who kind of take advantage of opportunities to maybe take advantage of those marketers. Those two extremes make the marketplace less transparent than it should be.
All right. So
That would be the
know,
negative one.
yes, yeah, for sure, for sure. I know that you have a great passion for this business, but given how complicated it sounds, why start your own company now?
I think this is the perfect time to start a new company. I mean, all the things that we talked about, all the things that are variables out there today, changes in technology, different ways that consumers behave, all those things have made it more important. I think it's the perfect time. There's so many marketers, the shrinking number of marketers who have really expert media help. And the same could be said for media owners and agencies. I mean, there's so many people who don't have senior level expertise. And frankly, in a lot of ways, they can't afford it, right? So, really senior people who spend in industry, I mean, again, we, on a 52 weeks a year, 5 days a week basis, we're expensive. So, but that being said, but you don't need, so, my experience can provide value to marketers and media owners and agencies. And I'm going to provide that value in like small increments. You're not going to hire me 52 weeks a year, but if we built a relationship together in 1 day a month, we really cranked on what your problems were and how to solve them and built a plan for you and developed a North Star on how to move yourself forward. And once a month, we came in and we looked at the plan. We helped track progress. We course corrected. We tackled new issues as they come up. I think I can provide tremendous value to everybody in the ecosystem, marketers, media owners, and agencies. I think it's a perfect time to start a new company.
And maybe that's the collaboration aspect that's been missing, or the glue that might help things go forward. You actually say that your company, Modern Media Solutions, focuses on providing, and I'll quote you, and I do like these words a lot, real world, tangible, practical, and sustainable marketing solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that? What does it mean?
That mean? That sounds very like fluffy. Yeah. I mean, I pride myself. I've been in media for 40 years. It's been my only professional, since I graduated university and I studied media and advertising in university. I consider myself to have a pretty deep knowledge across a wide spectrum of our industry. In the agency space, in planning and buying, I've been a marketer. I've obviously spent most of my career in the United States, spent a year and a half with my little icons in China. Happy New Year. We're about next month's the Chinese New Year. Also a lot of global experience. So I've got so much experience, but I pride myself in real solutions. I pride myself in, and there's nothing wrong with thought leadership and people who will, stand on stages and give talks about the industry. I want to do stuff. I want to help partners really drive productivity. Again, my ideal partnership is regularly. I say it's once a month. If we find a different flow, that's fine. We're going to really work together. We're going to spend a chunk of time together, and we're going to identify problems and we're going to solve problems. And I think that I want to really that's where we get to the practical real world solutions. I want to really do stuff at the end of an engagement, at the end of a year, if I've done some engagement, I don't want people being like, why the heck did I hire this guy? I want to be like, I hired him. We solved A, B, C, D, E. And that's how I roll. I'm a practical, I'm a hands-on person. I want to do stuff. So that's when we get to like practical real world solutions. That's kind of what I'm trying to reference.
No, that sounds refreshing. It actually sounds quite wonderful. And let me ask you something else. Um, so many people talk about how they just simply cannot stay up to date with all the new, the new media, platforms,
Really
issues
hard.
on the rise. How do you have advice on how they can? I mean, what do you think they should do?
Well, the first no brainer is hire me. I couldn't resist. Sorry. So short of hiring me, and I'm not,
I know that was
I'll work with
clever.
you.
Mhm.
I mean, it's obviously spending time in probably two things. Spending time in the trades. There's so many things. Obviously, the Internationalist is a great product. Spending time understanding what's going on by reading what's going on in the industry. And then also participating. Like I spent time as I was the co-chair of the media committee of the ANA and the 4As, the ANA and the WFA. No disrespect to the 4As. And it was really valuable for me, not just to sit in meetings and talk to people. It was really valuable to help us get a sense for what was going on. I mean, it was really invaluable. When I was an agency person, and I know how hard it is for a marketer, when I was an agency person, if I wanted to have a complex conversation about media, I'd walk out of my office and walk to the office next door and talk to one of my colleagues. And a marketer, it's a lot harder because the number of experts in our building is a lot less. There's some, but not enough. So really participating in these groups, like lending your mind into the community will help not only the community get better, it'll help you get access to a lot more information and know what's going on. So those are probably the two biggest things: read more and actually get involved in these groups.
Yeah, and I guess experiment, do
Oh,
more or
100%,
try.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great point. I mean, because it's like, and that's one of the things in today's market that with digitization and speed, the things that we can do, like one of the big cultural moments, you're right, it's a really big cultural insight of, we have the opportunity to fail fast. It's like nobody bats 1,000, but you should at least, you should test some things and throw some things against the wall, see what sticks. And that's super important. That's a great call.
Yeah, it takes a bit of courage, but who said that, you didn't have to be brave to be in this business?
Yeah, you know what? It's really interesting. My favorite story, I used to worked at an agency that worked on Intel was one of our clients. And we went to a global meeting once and Andy Grove was the CEO, and he walks into the meeting and there's a couple hundred people, and he gets on the stage and he says, "You people are not doing your jobs." And we all looked at each other like, oh my gosh, gonna be one of these speeches. And he goes, "The reason I know you're not doing your job is nobody complains about you. If no one's complaining about you, or if every single one of your metrics is green." I had this conversation with some of my ex-colleagues at MasterCard, was like, I want all my metrics to be green. I don't want yellows and reds on my dashboard. If everything is green and everything is perfect and nobody's complaining about you, you're not pushing it hard enough. You got to keep pushing and driving. You got to, pressure test that point. You don't want to be in a culture where everybody's complaining about you or every one of your metrics is failing. But if everything is hunky-dory and everything's going along, you're just kidding yourselves into things are great. Like you have to push harder and reestablish those benchmarks as you go along, because you have to keep evolving. Because if you don't push yourself, you're not going to evolve.
Yeah, well, isn't it the old Darwinian evolve or die, right?
Yes.
Which isn't easy. Well, let me ask you about one more trend, before it's extraordinary how quickly the time goes, but let me just ask you about one more trend, because in some ways you embodied some of it and you also observed some of it, but, certainly we're seeing so many more marketers bringing more media in-house. And, sometimes I think that, that's this natural evolution of wanting, more first party data and maybe a little greater closeness to the customer, or really being very much involved. Um, and it's not an easy thing to do because of some of the skills that you've outlined, and just the seniority, that you need to run this. What what would you advise marketers on doing
Yeah,
this, or will the trend go away? I don't know.
it's a great question. It's a question that we ask ourselves all the time. Like every brand has their own reasons, and there's no one solution. It's not binary. It's like makes sense, doesn't make sense. Generally speaking, I think, and I'm pretty consistent with this, I think it's harder than people think. I will often pick holes when everybody was like, well, I had to do my own in-house because I have my first party data. I pick holes in that a lot. I think it's easier if you had to line up, can I build an ironclad contract with a partner that says you own the data, they can utilize it to help you make decisions. I think it's way easier to build an amazing relationship with an agency or a partner. I'm not saying an ad agency, go find the right partner and contractually protect your data and your security. It's a heck of a lot easier to do that than it is to go through all the resources, hire all the resources, all the people. How do I continue to motivate and inspire the best people? I talked about the talent emergency that we have at agencies. Like imagine hiring, being within one marketer, finding people who are going to be dynamic and motivated to work on one brand, for a long period of time. I struggle with it. Now, again, it works for some people. But I, generally speaking, really think people have to look at it very, very carefully. And I'm not implying that people don't. You have to be really, really careful because in a lot of cases, it's not all it's cracked up to be. So everybody's got their own circumstances. But generally speaking, I line up on the side of like, you hire experts for a reason. And the solution is it's not as easy as saying, if I move it in-house, it will magically be better. Again, all the qualifiers, every situation is different, but generally speaking, I think that I think that in-housing is sometimes more difficult than people think.
Well, it also goes back to some of the things that you said at the beginning. If you hadn't had the 30 years on the agency side, you wouldn't have had the diversity of clients and so many different solutions, that you had to provide for so many different industries. And you can become very insular if you don't have
Yes.
that other element of always looking at other industries. I mean, I'm always surprised because everybody knows that financial is a very horizontal discipline that obviously crosses every possible industry. Well, marketing is too.
Yeah.
You can learn, you learn from B2B companies, you learn from, if you're on a drinks brand, you learn from an auto brand. I mean, it's a mindset, it's a strategy,
No, I mean, you're right. I spent 11 years at MasterCard in obviously hardcore financial services category. In my 30 years before that, I dabbled in some experience, but you wouldn't say I was a financial services guy in my experience at an agency. I mean, that well-roundedness, I think, is an important element, especially today. Today more than ever, being that, having that horizontal expertise of touching a bunch of different categories, Deborah, is super important. You bring up a really good point, and that's hard to deliver, in an in-house environment.
No, I agree, but nonetheless, I can certainly, I think there are certain situations where it does make
100%.
a tremendous amount of sense.
100%.
Well, it sounds like we've been very cautious about that one, but let me ask you a very direct question. So what's next for you and Modern Media Solutions?
Yeah. So it's been 2 months. I'm making progress. I did start at the end of a budget year and in the middle of a COVID outbreak. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I do have some partnerships in place, but I'm continuing to go out and talk about how I think I can help people create value. So, I'm pretty confident. Again, I wouldn't have left MasterCard. MasterCard was a great job, and it's the best job I've ever had. But it was just time to do something different, and I'm super confident. My first 2 months have done nothing to. It's a learning process, and I'm doing lots of cool stuff that I never did before. But that's kind of what I signed up for. That's what I want to do. So I will keep making progress. I'll keep talking to marketers and and media owners and agencies, and finding the right group of partners who feel like my experience can help them drive success. And I'm super confident that I'll be successful.
Well, I have no doubt, and I am certainly an advocate of having senior authoritative experts being willing to get to the root of a problem very quickly, and helping others figure out solutions. And I do think that is a great way to learn and to create value within companies, and I admire you for doing it. And I think we've learned it doesn't matter what the situation is, whether it's a pandemic or whether it's a budget year. If you've got the right ideas, they can take hold.
Yeah,
So I wish you the best, and I also hope that you'll come back and give us some other updates, because this
100%.
is
I appreciate the time today. Thank you for the wishes. I mean, I always love spending time with you, and I'm happy to, you'll see more of me.
excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
And you never know, we might have to check in on Chinese New Year to see if you have any more wonderful art behind you. So
Exactly.
good to talk, and all the best. The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories.